super pumped to be here. So let's dive right in. So my name is Kim Niedermaier, and I work as a software engineer at ActBlue, which, as Emily said, is building fundraising technology for the left. And tonight I'll talk about some of the design concepts I've applied and tools I use to make data visualizations that help explain a compelling data set. So it seems kind of obvious, but you can't really visualize anything without data, as we just saw. And I'm fortunate enough to work at a place that has some pretty darn interesting data. So for some context, it's been around since 2004, and since then more than 20,000 democratic campaigns, progressive organizations, and nonprofits have raised close to $2 billion with an average contribution size of just $36. So I started out on the team that was charged with explaining how these people were using our platform to make their voices heard. And monthly, we published top-line numbers and sometimes included graphics to tell that story. And this was 1 month into a job, and I had no idea what R or ggplot2 was, but someone that had the job that was doing these kind of graphics was like, hey, I'm on vacation, so maybe you could just make a chart and it'd be published. And so this is what I came up with. And this is way before I knew close to anything about data viz, so I just wanted to spend a little bit of time in walking through how to make something like this better, in case you're starting out like I was 2.5 years ago, not really knowing what to do and what to look for. So this is my revamped version, still using the same data from 2.5 years ago. I promise you we've broken some records since then. This is about 80,000 contributions in a single day, so if someone's better at math than me, they will know just how many per minute that was. It seems like a lot, felt like a lot then, but we're doing about 4 times as much now. But regardless, let's dive into the data viz side of things. All right, so you'll notice some differences, and I just want to break it down by kind of like layers of information. So starting with the x-axis, what you can see here is that just the number of ticks are decreased. I'm also ditching that military time thing and removing the label hour because I don't, well, again, I made this chart, I own all the decisions, but anyways, we're gonna make it better. Yeah, military time clearly needs a label, because I don't know if you're like me, but I didn't really realize that was connecting. But the AM and PM conventions are pretty useful, so you should use them. And also minimizing the number of ticks. Very good. Next, the Y scale. Didn't include a 0. I don't know who caught that on the chart that I just saw, but yeah, you should include 0, especially if you're actually starting with the limits, going from 0 to about 7,000 in this case. And what else? I actually added more tick marks in this case, just for a little bit more context. In fact, the biggest hour was something like 7,000 contributions, but without having that additional label, it was hard for readers to actually see whether or not it was 6,000 or 8,000, and maybe it doesn't matter, but I think it does matter. I think it really actually matters when you are explaining this information to people. And then finally, the text is no longer rotated 90 degrees, so you don't have to strain to read it. You can just see that it's contributions that we're talking about, and that's in the top left corner, which we're all conditioned to start from the top and read left to right. So putting as much information in that first corner to set people up for what they're going to see is going to be really helpful. And to that point, changing up the number or the amount of information that's actually in the title. I found that with subtitles, now I can tell you that we're breaking records, and this is only accurate as of July 2014. But more importantly, giving people a little bit more information so that they know that we're talking about contributions here and it's by hour, and a little bit additional explanation at the very beginning is what's going to prompt people to be able to understand the information that you're giving them. Okay, this one is probably, if you only take like one tip away from this talk, ditch legends if you can, because this is what's like your readers are going to just be looking from the bottom to the top instead of just in the line, and you really want them to be following the shape of the data and get them to understand the patterns and things like that. But if they're distracted and looking at fairly unfamiliar colors, I mean, we're talking about shades of I think old iPod minis, really, is what we're talking about here. Like I said, it was founded in 2004. There's a little bit of history that's fun, and I'll make fun a little bit. But anyways, people are not familiar with that relationship between like these 3 random dates and these three random colors. So if you can just consolidate that information into like one stream of thought, then your audience is going to take more out of this visualization as a result. And so, hey, we've got one more thing that I added, which is there's a massive spike at 4 a.m. And it's not because people are suddenly getting out of bed to donate money online. It's just not. Instead, what we're doing is we're processing recurring contributions in a batch so we can kind of clear the decks and be ready for the heavy traffic that comes later in the day. And so providing this little bit of information here is what's going to, again, make sure that people aren't thinking that you're working with inaccurate data or anything like that. This is the story that you're controlling, so you might as well realize that you can't always be the one having a conversation with someone about this information, and so putting as much into note format on charts are really is going to be beneficial. And you'll see that a lot in some of the examples that I'll include later. Okay, voila, a slightly better chart. Get the basics done, and then you'll find yourself in a much better position to tackle some more complicated graphics. So just to summarize a little bit, what we're really trying to do is get as much clarity as possible and increase the amount of like useful information. So to do that, it's add context and titles and subtitles, get rid of unnecessary elements. If access titles are intuitive, which are not military time for someone like me, then you can ditch that label, and that's great. You can also annotate and point out additional information that way, and then use those conventional abbreviations, and make sure that people don't strain to read things. So increase the size of fonts, minimize random colors, and just keep text horizontal. That'll go a long way. Okay, now is my chance to talk about why D3 is awesome, and if you haven't yet explored, you should go and explore it. If you're not familiar, it's a collection of low-level modules that offer the flexibility to compose any visualization that you can dream up. And because you're working with web standards like HTML, CSS, SVG, and JavaScript, debugging is very straightforward. So it's actually a fairly approachable thing. So if you've already got the basics down pat and you want to, I guess, take it to the next level or something like that, then I definitely encourage you to come up with custom graphics in a way that you'll see in the next couple of examples are like fully taking advantage of what you can be doing these days. All right, so NPR has been doing like some really cool visual stuff, and even though they're known for their audio, I just want to plug this chart because what I think is really neat about it is, one, it's a divergent color scale that makes sense. So you can pick up where the averages are, and in this case, that deeper red is where school spending is less per student, per school district, and then that green is where they're spending more money. And what I like about it too is you've got the same rules are applied to every single school district in America. They're the same size. And so what you end up seeing are these patterns where the note that you may or may not see, depending on your eyesight right now, is Alaska is this row of points that's closest to me, and it's the most just dispersed. And then you look at some of the states like Alabama and Florida are highlighted where it's a little bit more, it's a lot more concentrated actually. So again, it's the same rules applied, and so you're letting the data speak for itself, and you can show that variation in a way where if you're trying to design something, and I mean like a much more just, what's the word? Yeah, instead of you calling out, you're letting the data speak for itself. And you're just using the tools, in this case, color and position to explain that. So I thought that was a nice chart. And then next up, we've got kind of the prototypical example of that the New York Times has done. In fact, Tufte's book in the 80s said that this is a great mix of broad data and also finer points. Plus it's interactive, and then I'm supposed to keep this on the down low, but Portland really is not very rainy in the summer at all. So we'll keep that there for a little bit. But again, you get that like broad part of it with like each of the days are composed, like you get a sense of like what's actually going on, but also you can look at the actual record-breaking days and things like that. So it's really neat. They do great stuff. And again, the annotations are right there, so you can kind of treat your readers with respect in that sense. And then finally, I want to close with this example, which is a static chart from 538. And you can kind of imagine that this, maybe somewhere in the editing process, they thought about, oh, well, someone can just like switch between the 6 different ways that states get income, revenue from taxes. But instead, they're laying it out in front of you. And so you end up with these kind of small multiples. And it's a really great use of just your classical graphic design principles, which is proximity, repetition, alignment, and contrast. And so you end up, treating your reader through what you want them to be able to see. So again, news organizations have a slightly different point of view than like your typical like organization, or if you're building like dashboards for only people that are going to see it within your organization or company. But these are some tricks and tools, and I just want to say thank you so much. And hold on. And I meant to say one thing earlier, which is that the coolest thing that I think found throughout like this 2-year thing through DataViz was that a donut chart is really just a stacked bar chart using a polar coordinate system. So thanks.